Welcome to the Digital Accessibility Podcast, hosted by me, Joe James, and sponsored by PCR Digital, who provide people-centric recruitment. Throughout the series, I'll be interviewing advocates, experts, and practitioners of digital accessibility to help raise awareness for the work that they do and discuss the role digital accessibility has in all of our lives. I hope that you find value in these discussions and are inspired to join the journey towards a more accessible digital world. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy the chat. Today I'm joined by Dani Devesa Derksen-Staats, ex-Senior Accessibility iOS Engineer at Spotify, author of Developing Accessible iOS Apps, prolific tweeter, and overall accessibility advocate. Dani's just about to start a very exciting new venture with one of the world's largest tech companies. We're not actually able to disclose who has snapped Dani up at the time of recording, but if you follow him on LinkedIn or X, formerly Twitter, then you will be sure to find out. Dani's had an amazing career, firstly working as a research fellow on augmented reality tools and interactive catalogs for the University of Valencia, moving on to work as an iOS developer and engineer for some of the largest companies out there. So you've got the BBC, the Times, SkyScanner, and most recently Spotify. He's been on a mission since Global Accessibility Awareness Day 22 to tweet 365 days of accessibility, helping to raise awareness for mobile and iOS accessibility. So I'm going to stop there. It's quite a long intro, but welcome to the podcast, Dani.
Hey, yeah, thank you so much. I'm so happy to finally be here and have the chance to sit down and talk a little bit about accessibility with you. And yeah, I really appreciate you inviting me, and I'm looking forward to it.
You're more than welcome. I'm very excited. We had a quick chat just before, and I've let you know that you were actually my inspiration for getting started with this podcast back in 2022. It took some doing, but yeah, I saw that you started your journey on the 365 days of accessibility to raise awareness, and I thought, well, what could I do to help? It's such an important field. I'd love to do my bit as well. So we've had 7 successful episodes so far. Absolutely honoured that you're finally here as well, and we've got the opportunity to do this. So yeah, I guess could you just tell us a bit more about your decision to start posting those tweets and slides since then?
Yeah, and first, like, congrats for the podcast. I'm really enjoying it so far, and yeah, every time I hear that I've been an inspiration, it's just mind blowing. It feels real, and it fills my heart with joy. And so, really appreciate your kind words. And I guess that was my hope actually when I started, but I did not have any expectations. So I thought that the greatest thing about working in accessibility is that everything you do has a great positive impact, but it was limited to the projects I was working on. So I thought that by sharing some of the things I knew or some of the tricks I knew, hopefully someone out there would pick it up and apply those things to the projects as well. And I saw that as hopefully a way of making like a higher impact, hopefully creating this snowball effect that more and more people would learn about accessibility and apply those concepts to the projects.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a mix of things that inspired me to do this. There was Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and Jenison Asuncion, one of the co-founders, I think presenting their foundation, said something like, "We should go from one day of awareness to a year of action." So that's why I want to do like a whole year of tweets. But then so many people that have been advocating for accessibility, and I've learned so much from like Sally Shepherd or Summer Panas. It's one of my idols. Like I've learned so much from them. So I thought it would be very cool to give back a bit of what I learned from them. Or Paul Hudson in the iOS community is very well known for 100 Days of Swift. And I saw that format of little chunks of information that you could consume daily could work really well. So I started one day, had like a 220-day strike, more or less. I'm very happy about it, but sad that I could not continue. But I'm really hoping to finish them one day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the thing. By that logic of one day of awareness, you're hopefully going to have created 365 years of action by the end of that. So that's just incredible, and it's such a huge undertaking because obviously that's not the only thing that you've had to focus on throughout the last couple of years. So, and they're so detailed. They're really great, and you know the visual that you put towards all of that as well. I think people can appreciate the effort that goes into that. And I couldn't believe you were already keeping up doing it. So I think you should be very proud of what you've done there. And yeah, it'd be great to see that finished. And maybe you could have a little book, a flick book of each day, 365. I guess you've already you've done the author's part of things as well, so you've got your book out there. I haven't actually got a question based around that, but hopefully we can draw some inspiration from what you've written in your book as well. But yeah, great achievement.
Thank you.
And you've also again worked with some incredible companies over the last sort of 10 plus years, which is quite a long period of time. I'm not trying to age you or anything, but when time has probably flown over 10 years, but you must have seen still a huge amount of change when it comes to what's available in accessibility within the iOS and general mobile space through that time. Are there any standout improvements, or could you let us know some of the largest improvements that you've seen over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, to start with, like when I started my career, I think I didn't even know what accessibility was. I studied a 5-year degree, computer science degree, and I was not the best of students, but I'm pretty sure like I never heard anything about accessibility, which is very disappointing. And I'm happy that that's something that seems to be changing now.
Yeah.
But for example, the first iPhone, and not many people know that, it was not accessible. If you think about it, it was a flat sheet of glass, no keyboard, barely any buttons. VoiceOver was not available in the first version. It took a couple more years for Apple to do that. There's an audio documentary called 36 Seconds that changed everything that I really, really recommend, that tells that story. And it's not criticism to Apple. I don't know what were the reasons why that happened. And we know that the story has a happy ending. So when the iPhone 3GS was released, they presented the first accessibility settings screen with VoiceOver and Zoom. And it really is outstanding. I think the Apple's progression over the last few years, they kept improving, and every single year they released a new tool, API feature. So switch control came over, which is like the possibility of using the iPhone with as little as a single switch or button. Then voice control, that feels pretty magical, like the first time you use it and how much you can achieve with it as well. Then full keyboard access, the possibility of using the phone with a physical keyboard as well. And a ton of tools for developers. So now we have the possibility, for example, to implement graphs that are represented with audio. So a voiceover user can hear a sound that changes in pitch depending on the x-axis value, and then they can identify trends, right? Like, are those values going up or down or up and down? So that's very cool.
Wow.
And lately, I think Apple is just being brilliant at every single year releasing, again, features that feel like magic. So I think usually now they're presenting them around Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which is quite cool. And 2022, they released something called Assistive Touch for the Apple Watch. And it's the possibility of using the watch just with the hand you're wearing, where you're wearing your watch. So you can do things like, we will show a cursor around one of the elements in the UI, and you can do a single pinch to go forward, double pinch to go backwards, fist clench to select it. So no more need to use your nose to see the notifications or anything if you're carrying a bag in the other hand or something. So that's pretty cool. Or they presented something where you can use your phone to detect doors, and it would say, do you have to push? Do you have to pull? Are there any signs outside of the door? So I think that's pretty cool. And in 2023, they presented something called personal voice, where you can do a few recordings of the voice, and that's meant for people that are at risk of losing their voice. And then it creates a synthetic voice that sounds like you. So in the future, if you lose your voice, you can keep using your voice. And I think that's brilliant as well. Or the same feature that detects doors. Now you can point at things where you think there's text in it, and it will read that text for you. So in case you cannot see it properly or something, the phone will let you know what you're pointing at. It's pretty cool as well.
It's
And now
awesome.
they're releasing this month the Vision Pro. So they had a video about it in WWDC, Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, about how accessible it is, and it's there's lots of challenges, right, with augmented reality and virtual reality, but I think they're nailing it. Not to say that they find challenges for sure, and I'm just looking forward to see how they tackle them.
Yeah, I mean, so much, and that's just one company as well. To think that they're releasing all of those things, and I think just to touch on that point, I know you've got a couple of other things to mention there, but when you mentioned about the personal voice, I think there was a really moving advert that they put out at the time as well when they were announcing
Yeah,
that, and it's just there's so many different scenarios where that could be used. Even if you're losing your own voice, but then I'm imagining the future of AI, and if you can implement that within a virtual avatar, and then those of us that unfortunately are no longer here, you would still be able to hear and see your loved ones. So it's yeah, I mean there's challenges with that in itself as well, and I think with data and GDPR and your own image and things, I think that's another set of challenges. But yeah, it was a really moving thing, and so nice to see something like that being put
yeah.
together.
Yeah, I really recommend watching that ad. It's really amazing. I think those are great examples when a company takes accessibility beyond compliance and they want really to serve the user and to think like, what do they need from us? What can we do for them? And that's awesome.
Absolutely, yeah. And then wider reaching, sort of like within the industry. You sent me some notes, which is great. You mentioned that you're seeing that companies are having more accessibility champion networks and things like that as well.
Yeah, I was lucky that I worked for a few startups and then I joined the BBC. So the BBC, I think, has probably the first accessibility champions network in the industry, and there was a great culture around accessibility. It's the first place where maybe a ticket had some specifications about accessibility, or a design had some annotations, or something I worked on was failed by a QA because it wouldn't work properly with VoiceOver. And it was really the first time where I started working, doing things more accessible and learning about accessibility. And and the first thing I thought is, why is this not a thing everywhere? Like, why does it feel like a special thing here at the BBC? But I've been lucky that since then, I worked for other companies where accessibility has been like really important. I joined SkyScanner, for example, and they were starting like a great accessibility network. Heather has been doing like a brilliant job there,
Mm.
and yeah, it was amazing to see how much they accomplished with little like resources, just by getting some people that were passionate about it together and talking about it and seeing how they could do more. And then I joined Spotify, and the same, like when I joined, there was no accessibility team, but we had an accessibility guild, was called back then. Same thing, it was just people that were at the company that were passionate about it, and we were trying to see how we could make accessibility more important, or yeah, or at least for our colleagues to be more aware of it, and things like that. And you can see how they thought it was really important because they actually decided to create a specific team for being focused in accessibility. And I'm super happy that that's something that you kind of see more and more in the industry as well. Slack, for example, has an accessibility team as well. Twitter used to have an amazing one before someone with lots of money decided that. Yeah. So yeah, but that's another story.
I'm just wondering if I can tweet, or would you call them tweets now? Or are they called X's? What is it called? But yeah, I'll skate around that one.
Exactly. No, but yeah, I wanted to mention the Twitter example, for example, because they set up the bar really high to the point that not users with that use accessibility or assistive technologies, but every single user, even main media, expect now for every single major piece of software to have to meet those standards. And there was a clear example when Facebook launched Threads. They were not supporting alt text for images. And again, no criticism. I've learned my lesson as well that you don't know what was happening in the team, like how they were pushing things. But I think the great news is everyone demanded from them to implement it as soon as possible, and they pointed out that it was not right. So 2 years ago, no social network was allowing for users to add alt text to images. Now Twitter does, LinkedIn does, Threads does, Slack does. So yeah, it's amazing to see that we are in the right direction. It's taking a lot of effort and time, but we are getting there.
Yeah, I think that it's good to see that the option is there as well for everyone now, and the users of those types of platforms, because it's a strange world that we live in now. I think, 10 years again is a long period of time, but it goes so quickly. And now everyone has the world at their fingertips. You're able to create content and put it out there, but if the option isn't even available for you to make that accessible, then you're excluding such a large portion of people that may have interacted with your media or your content. So just by implementing that as a possibility, you're giving the user the opportunity to make the difference themselves as well, which is, yeah, it's just brilliant to see that that's happening now.
Yeah, exactly. I think captions are a great example as well. How maybe initially people were paying attention to them for deaf users or hard of hearing users, but how Gen X is a big fan of subtitles and captions now, and how we use more and more often our devices in places where it's noisy or we don't have our headphones, and without those we can consume the content either. So
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I'm not a member of Gen X because I'm over 30 now. But I've always just had to use captions. I think that strangely, I've got relatively good hearing. However, I just find it that I can focus a lot better when I have the option of captions there.
same
Just
for me.
kind of, yeah, follow along conversations. So it's yeah, it's good. Brilliant. So moving on to the next sort of question I'd like to ask would be around within your roles. From what I've seen and what we've discussed, you seem to always have that evangelist kind of hat on, but you remain very much hands-on in terms of the actual physical development for iOS. So do you feel that you can implement the most amount of positive change from that position, being hands-on, being technical within a company, or is it just that's the way it's kind of worked out?
Yeah, it's a mix of both things, and the interesting point is to find the right balance, I guess. When I started working full time in accessibility, my first reaction was to jump and try to fix every single issue I found, but that's just not sustainable long term for many reasons. Like you cannot do everything yourself. You may have to fix a piece of software that someone else has worked on, and therefore you don't really know. Some other people do, so they're more suited to fix those things with your help, hopefully. Um, So I find the advocacy and educational aspect of the role, or it is super important. It's extremely important. The more people you can teach, the better. And if you can like transmit your passion for it, and for people to understand how important it is, that's the key. So I find it really important to work, for example, a lot with designers, because most features start in the design process, and that's like the earlier you start, the better, right? But the more designers that know about accessibility, the more they are going to take certain considerations that are going to make it so engineers cannot even like make it not accessible in a way, or they may be able to add some annotations to it as well. But I think it's also super important to keep being hands-on as well. Stay close to the code so you can feel what the pain points other developers are finding. To keep learning as well, because as we mentioned, for example, in iOS, Apple releases new things every year. So to be able to think yourself from time to time as well, like keeps you learning those new things. And um, yeah, I think sometimes as well, because of your role being focused on accessibility, there are certain problems that might be require a bit more specialized knowledge. Like another thing is you cannot pretend that everyone is an expert in accessibility. What we say as well, like, is most of the issues you find out there are really, really simple things that everyone can know and fix. But obviously, like, there's some things that will require like some more advanced or specialized solutions to it. And for those cases, yeah, I think it's very good to have someone with the knowledge in house to be able to do those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that brings you back full circle, I suppose, because you can't be expected to do everything yourself. I think the problem is there is a lot of that expectation within the industry or within the community of accessibility that one specialist can fix everything, and that just creates a huge amount of burnout. It undervalues the importance of the role, and I think then you're just spread way too thinly. And then, are you really going to be making the best positive amount of contribution that you could have done if you focused on smaller chunks and gain that advocacy from other people? So yeah, I agree. I think that balance is great, and you seem to have that down to quite a fine art. So yeah, it's good to see, leading by example, hopefully. But that's
Yeah,
great.
and yeah, 100%. I was in Accessibility Toronto a couple of years ago, and I was sad to find that one of the common themes from most, like, or lots of the talks was burnout in the industry, precisely because of what you said, like little resources, a lot is expected from you. And I think as well because people working on accessibility are really, really passionate about it. So you really try to give your best, and yeah, you need to see that people are on board with you in that journey.
Yeah, and I think again what you've mentioned about staying close to the code, and I think so that you've got a relevant viewpoint from what a developer would see. So I'm trying to put together a bit of a post or a bit of content around the similarities between the cyber and information security sort of boom of a few years ago, or sort of 5-10 years ago, and accessibility now, because of the regulation change, because of the awareness that's growing. But back then a lot of people were seeing cyber and information security as this team that came in to stop you developing, they as a blockade. No, you can't continue until you do X, Y, or Z. But unfortunately, I think there are developers, development teams, or even senior stakeholders that see accessibility as one of those things. They want the minimal
Mhm.
viable product. That's what they're going for, and everything is fast and agile. We just need something out there. We need a product that people are using, rather than we need to make it, available to a larger chunk of the community. So I'm really going to try and pin those nuances a
Mm.
bit better. And cyber is ingrained now. You've got things like DevSecOps, so why can't we have Dev Accessibility Ops? you know?
Yeah, I always like explain the example of when I started my career as a software engineer. I found that we were struggling to sell the idea of automated testing, and how of the arguments we had for it are the same that we are having for accessibility. And I find interesting that somehow automated testing has become part of the culture of software engineering. Like it's expected for you to know about it, like every single job posting mentions it, every single interview is going to ask about it, but somehow we haven't got there with accessibility. What I always say as well is, as software engineers, our main goal is to do software that works, and if it's not accessible, it's not working for a lot of people. So we fail to do what we what we were supposed to do.
Absolutely, yeah. Just we need to get to that end goal at least.
Mhm.
Brilliant. And so when it comes to, like you say, the job specs and finding new people within this space, or hiring other engineers and designers or members of accessibility guilds or teams, in previous roles, have you had any involvement, or do you have any advice of what you think the right person would look like in terms of what they've written on a CV or what they've achieved?
Yeah, I've been involved sometimes in hiring processes, and I think the difficult thing to know is what you said, like to define really well what the job is going to be and what is going to be expected from that person. Very often you see um, like job postings for accessibility roles that could be 2 or 3 different roles, and also to have like the right kind of expectations of what people can you find. So as an example of mobile engineering, right? If you're finding someone that knows a lot about iOS development and accessibility, and that's what you need, and you can find someone, perfect. Like you hit jackpot. But a lot of times I think it's more or you can start that way and see if you can find someone. But I think a lot of times it's more realistic to think, would I work better finding someone that is a really good iOS engineer with a passion for accessibility, even if it's not a specialist, that we can upskill, that we can give them room to learn about it, teach them what's necessary, um, that to hopefully bring that person to the level we need, or the other way around? Do we know someone that it's an accessibility specialist and doesn't know much about iOS development, that is willing to learn it, always wanted to know more about iOS development? We have lots of iOS developers in the company. Can we get that person and yeah, teach them what the person will need to do the job? And I think that's sometimes like a better strategy probably, and something that not a lot of times companies consider.
I think you're right, and another thing that I'm trying to get together as, you know, someone that's trying to help with the recruitment in the space, is avenues of roles for people. So rather than it just being you're an accessibility specialist and that job description is as long as a piece of string, because you've got every
Mm.
single requirement, every web accessibility you know, bit of knowledge, even web development. So you're looking at HTML, CSS, JavaScript, all the new modern frameworks, and they're
Mhm.
saying, oh, but we have mobile products as well, so they need to know Swift, they need to know, you know, Java or Kotlin for Android, and again, it just goes on and on. So I'm trying to say, you know, you can have people that focus on accessibility that have the technical, people that have the strategy and you know, the general sort of program and project management around that and
Exactly.
awareness. Even the, you know, the culture change could go into that section. So to split them out rather than just, yeah, you're a specialist, so you should be able to do absolutely everything. I think that's the unfortunate expectation at the moment. So
Mhm.
yeah, you're right. I think a lot of that onus is on me now, I think, because I'm trying to be the guy for accessibility recruitment. Um, so yeah, I can always use as much help as possible. I listen to, you know, all the feedback from people, and I think that leads on to sort of salaries and expectations in recompensation and things in that regard as well. So it's unfortunately, when it's an unknown to people that are holding the purse strings, or
Mm.
you know, giving the budget for new areas of exploration within a company, they're not going to give you what you want. So it is tricky, but I think that the tide will turn as soon as, you know, we get more movement in that space. So brilliant. And I guess what's your experience been of the sort of job hunting and interview process throughout your career. Is there anything that you've done personally to ensure that you're moving into another accessibility focused role as an iOS developer, an engineer, or have you sort of gone for iOS engineer roles with you've got a feeling that you could probably advocate for that and then include that as an extracurricular kind of thing that you do when you join?
Yeah, it's been more like that, I think. As I mentioned, I started learning a lot about accessibility at the BBC, and I try to get more and more involved with the Champions Network there. And then when I moved to SkyScanner, one of the first things I try to see is like what is being done around accessibility here. And then I joined the Champions Network they had there, and I think that's the good thing as well when you start in a company and you have that bit of knowledge that is not extended to everyone, like, or that, yeah, that is unfortunately still rare. You tend to gain more and more responsibilities and be more and more involved in helping to change the culture around accessibility and to help other teams and not just yours, and things like that are actually, I think, very important for career development. So in lots of big companies, you're going to be asked to, in order to progress, to have a bigger impact than just your team, but help other teams and do improvements that are good cross company and not just like focused in your little area of what you own. And when I joined Spotify, same thing. Like I joined with no expectations. I actually didn't know the project I was going to start working on. They said it was something new and secret. So I just found out when I was going to start, and it was the Spotify Kids app, and it was a super fun project to be involved with. And same thing, I just tried to find like the people that were passionate about accessibility in the company, and eventually the team was created. And because of the work I had been doing in the guild, they thought of me as someone that could join the team, and I'm super grateful for that. I think it was very special to be able to join a team that is completely focused on accessibility. But I think, yeah, other people that, for example, can influence, and something I try to do in the companies I worked before as well, like hiring processes, and if you can, for example, add questions about accessibility in the pool of questions that you ask to candidates, I think that's brilliant. As we know, lots of people may not know the answer to those questions, but I think it works really well as a statement of it's important to us. So the person, if it's successful and joins the company, will think they asked me about accessibility, so it's surely something important in this company. And more importantly, if you can like influence what are the requirements in job descriptions as well, if you can add accessibility there, then the candidates will prepare for it before they get to the interview. And again, it's a statement of it's important in here. Automated testing is important. Accessibility is as important as well.
It's brilliant. Yeah, I agree. But then I think the only issue with that, from my perspective, is adding anything else to job specs already.
Yeah.
I think people are going to go, oh God, you want me that have that as well? Like, but I guess if it's a nice to have or just to mention, you know, again, it's just showing the dedication to growth in that field, or you know, offering that opportunity of something beyond the day-to-day job that you're being hired to do. And again, career progression, if you've got that passion and you want to grow in your career and not just keep doing the same thing, then this is an amazing and very rewarding avenue to take. So yeah, I agree. So I'm going to go on to a little bit more of a techie sort of side of things, which hopefully you'll enjoy. I was having a think about a lot of the issues that we do see within mobile and digital accessibility in general, and thinking they're not necessarily all just from an ignorance or unawareness standpoint, in terms of excluding users. I think a lot of it is unintentional, but I think that sometimes it is just that we didn't have the tools or the knowledge that we do now, so that a lot of legacy platforms and tech or applications have been developed in that time period without the consideration for things like voice over switch controls and any other sort of assistive tech. And then because of that, it becomes 20 to 30 times more expensive to put it right, because they're already in, they're already active products that people are using. So I don't mean for you to solve everything right now on the podcast. It'd be great if you did, but do you have a vision for how we would overcome this issue, or is it just we need to just scrap everything and start developing again with accessibility in mind? Or could we automate that and streamline in a more streamlined solution to ensure that, we're getting the overhaul sort of done, and those legacy apps that are still long standing and needed are going to be able to become more accessible?
Yeah, no, I think it's a super interesting topic, and I think so. In the mobile world, especially iOS and Android, I think the best tip I can give anyone is use native components if you can. So native components are the components for building UIs that in the case of iOS, Apple provides you. It could be labels, buttons, text fields, things as simple as that, but also colors, and more complicated components like color pickers or date pickers, things like that. And obviously, like sometimes you need something that they don't provide, or to add functionality they don't give. But I'm saying that because actually the first time I remember hearing the term accessibility was when I was working at a really small startup called Bananity in Barcelona, and I was the sole mobile developer doing both iOS and Android apps. And just to make my life easy, I decided to use native components out of the box, customize them as little as possible. And then one user thanked us in the App Store for making the app accessible. And I was like, what? Like, I haven't done anything. Like, let me check this out. And then I found that, yeah, if you use native components, Apple is very good at making those components accessible. So there's not much work you need to do. And I find that, as you said, bigger and older projects tend to have a lack of accessibility because maybe at the time they decided to implement components themselves because they didn't existed, or the ones that Apple provided didn't have the functionality they needed. An example could be there's a component in iOS called collection view that is a way of drawing very complicated layouts like grids or if you think about the Pinterest kind of layout where there's columns that of different heights and things like that. You could do something like that with a collection view, but that's a component that didn't exist when iOS development started. And when Apple started providing it, it was not very performant. So a lot of teams would decide to make those components themselves. The problem with that is you need to think about accessibility, and if you don't, then there's a problem. For example, now when Apple introduced dynamic type or the possibility to increase the text size, if you didn't consider that for your collection view, then the layout would start to break and things like that. But what I like to say in this sort of projects, big projects, is I like the Boy Scout rule. So always leave the campground cleaner than you found it. And in the accessibility world, we like to say progress over perfection. So just when you have to do something new or go and fix a bug, just have a look around and see what you can improve. A lot of times I hear people saying, like, what's the point of making this screen accessible if the rest of the app isn't? But you have to start somewhere, and users will value that, and it will set a precedent. It will set an example for everyone else, and it's just a way of starting. I think a few years ago, every single project in iOS was Objective-C, and Apple introduced Swift, for example. Today, most projects are UIKit, and Apple introduced Swift UI, and now teams are trying to see how they can migrate. And in most projects, what happened is if I have to write something new, I make sure it's in Swift or it's Swift UI, or it's accessible in this case. If I need to fix a bug, then maybe I change this piece of code to Swift or Swift UI. So I think that's a good approach, just little by little, and it takes time, but you'll get there.
Absolutely, yeah, and it can be done. You've proven that.
Hmm.
I think it's just the commitment, I think, as well is the big part. Um, but brilliant. I mean, you've already taught us so much in this short space of time. But the final question that I always ask on these episodes is, um, what do you believe is the simplest and most cost-effective way that someone can implement more digital accessibility within their own line of work? Um, is there anything in particular, or would you say what you've just said kind of covers a lot of that off?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Ted Lasso, and there's a quote that I don't remember. He says a quote from someone. I don't remember who that was, but is be curious, not judgmental. So I think that's the key is to ask yourself questions and most issues that you see are repeated over and over, and they're not difficult to fix at all. You see missing labels, you see color contrast issues, you see buttons that are too small, things like that. So if you ask yourself questions like, what happens if my user cannot see the screen, or what happens if my user does not differentiate colors, or what happens if my user cannot hear or cannot touch the screen, then you start being in that right mindset of thinking, how do I make this accessible? And yeah, not being judgmental, not making assumptions of how your users may use your app. I think, for example, I assume back in the day, maybe blind users don't use the camera, the app, for example, and that's far from true. It's one of the apps that a lot of them use the most. So yeah, I think be curious, yeah, ask yourself questions and be not being judgmental, not making assumptions. I like again the example of the Threads app. I think we have to approach uh, accessibility with kindness as well, and I need to remind myself about that as well. Many times they ended up implementing alt text for images, and I've been involved in many apps, for example, where the reviews in the app store have been the opposite. Like it's been like, is there anyone working in accessibility in this app? And you are working on accessibility in that app. And not just you, but a lot of brilliant people. But we fail as well. Sometimes things may regress. You do your best, and yeah, uh, progress over perfection, I think, is the thing that everyone should keep in mind.
Definitely, and I think that kindness, it needs to extend further always. I think that
Hmm.
you probably get a lot of people thinking, are you even doing anything? And you think, oh my God, there's only a certain amount of hours in the day, there's only a certain amount of things that I can actually focus on at one given time, and your mental health and your work-life balance and everything that goes behind you, the human that's trying to make a difference. If you're going to pile on even more pressure as a user that thinks nothing's being done, I mean, it's just going to make things worse. So I think we need that acceptance of, we're trying, but it's going to take some time to get there. But also, we need to shout out about it more, like you're doing. So I think that it's just, look, we're aware, we're trying to do X, Y, and Z, and holding our hands up.
Exactly.
I think that Chris Patno said that when we were visiting the ADC, the Accessibility Discovery Centre in Google's offices in London, and he just said, look, we're not perfect. Like we are going to make mistakes, and if anything, it's the best thing we can do, because then that will highlight more issues that we need to focus on or do better in the future. So
Hmm.
I think trying to be perfect is a pointless exercise. So I completely
100%.
agree, and I think that what you've just shared there is a profound and apt sort of way to bring the episode to a close, Danny. So thank you so much for joining me, and for just all the friendship and advice that you've given to me over the years that we've sort of known each other online. And I just hope that we can stay in touch. You've had a huge impact and positive impact on so many people with your tweets, your book. A lot of the people that I hire for other companies have mentioned your work as well. So I hope that you understand how much you're giving back to the community. So it's just been a pleasure to get to know you over the years, and yeah, hope that we can stay in touch moving forward as well.
Same, yeah, I really hope so. Thank you so much for everything, and yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward for more episodes of the podcast as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, hopefully we'll do some more group sessions or something as well, and
That would be
you
awesome.
can be a part of that. But thanks for joining me this time, and yeah, I'll see you all on the next one.
Thank you.